I'm the senior pastor here. Ooh, never say that normally, but just feeling old today. I feel a bit old because this year, my wife Narelle and I, we are about to hit our 30th wedding anniversary in July. I've really been applause you for Narelle because you need a gold medal for putting up with me for 30 years. But if I turn the microphone on. Thank you, Zach, for that great performance there, mate. People are giving him a round of applause. Well done, buddy. If I close my eyes, I can actually, I can remember the first time that I met Narelle. I was leading a thing called a summer mission team way back a long time ago, and she was one of the new people that I had not met on the team. We were holding a commissioning service, and Narelle and her friend Ruth sang. And I remember thinking, she'll be helpful for our music program. No, there was actually no thunder and lightning. In fact, I was chatting with a mate of mine a couple of weeks later, and he asked me this question. He said, Harris, is there any talent on the team? And you know what he meant when he said talent, don't you? And my response was, no, I don't think so. Ouch. In fact, interest, spark in the heart, attraction, whatever you want to call it, came kind of weeks later. Now, I'm certain that if you asked me how I felt about Narelle in those weeks and months that followed, the language would have continued to change, because at some point in my mind, it moved from that sort of spark, interest, whatever, to the love category. When you're in your 20s and you feel like your heart is ablaze, that's what kind of love feels like, I suppose. As I'm now in my mid-50s and I reflect back, I'm sure that what I had in my heart was some form of love, but like a baby that begins to crawl or stumble or walk, you can't exactly put it in the Usain Bolt category. I'm sure in my 20s I didn't realise or understand or appreciate the full kind of comprehension of what love is. About 13 years ago, when I was still a pastor up at a church in Sydney, I was helping out an elderly couple. And they were somewhere in their early 80s. The husband had been slowly deteriorating with dementia and had become very difficult. The wife had recently taken to putting deadbolts on their house. The deadbolts were not to keep unwanted people out, they were to keep her husband in. At night, on a number of occasions, he had got up in the middle of the night, walked out the door, walked a kilometre, 2 kilometres from their house and been lost in the early hours of the morning. Confused, he was found by police wandering. As I sat beside her listening, she poured out her heart and her struggles. Where once there was a man that she celebrated with, that she laughed with, that she cried with, that she shared life with, now there was very little. Little moments amidst the long goodbye. She teared up with me as she shared how he would angrily yell at times because he couldn't understand what was going on in the world. He couldn't understand what was going on in his head. She told me how she would work with healthcare people to get him into man nappies because he could no longer control his bowel movements. I remember sitting there amidst her tears and some of my tears, feeling sorry for her, a bit embarrassed, a bit disturbed. Embarrassed not only because of what she was going through and the shame of putting a man in a nappy, but also embarrassed because I could see the love that she had for him, and that she would sacrifice, in a sense, her dignity to express that. It disturbed me more than her, I think. It disturbed my idealised, simple understanding of love. This was not the love of passionate teenage romance. This was a different expression of love. A deeper love that perseveres in difficult times, that does not give up easily. This was sacrificial love. See, an encounter with sacrificial love changes everything. What do you think love is? What is love is an age-old question, isn't it? Asked by philosophers, musicians, poets. It's a question posed in various forms. For me, I think of this song and lyrics from the 90s. I'm not going to sing this. What is love? Oh, baby, don't hurt me no more. Baby, don't hurt me no more. What is love? Yeah. Yeah. Truly profound. What is love? The question is asked on more than just an English paper, isn't it? It's asked in the heart of every single person. I'm sure you ask yourself that question. What is love? Now, in 2 weeks' time, our nation will stop what it is doing. People will stand at attention and be silent for 1 minute as we remember. Grandchildren, children, soldiers will march. Crowds will look on with admiration. Some will applaud, but most will be silent. They will remember and give thanks for sacrifice, for men and women that fought for freedom, for many that gave up their lives for their nation, for their countrymen and countrywomen. And at some point in time, we will hear Anzac Day speeches, and in the midst of those Anzac Day speeches, we will hear these words read: "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." These are words from the Bible, from John 15. Jesus speaks about them as he talks about loving others, loving brothers and sisters. Greater love has no one than this, than they lay down their life for their friends. What is love? Well, this was the first image that came up when I Googled it, and I realised I haven't made the slide. Man, I'm really going well today. Thanks, Tom, for trying to put that up. I had a beautiful slide to put up right here, and it was a really corny slide. It looked like a slide which was a Hallmark card. It had lines like, "Love is when you wait for a message from a loved one. Love is when you want to be with someone. Love is sweet. Love is the language of feelings." It's a banal list, because love must be more than feelings. You see, at Easter time, we see in Jesus what love truly is. As they led Jesus away, a man named Simon, who was from Cyrene, happened to be coming in from the countryside. Soldiers seized him, put the cross on him, and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large crowd trailed behind, including many grief-stricken women. 2 others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross. The criminals were also crucified, one on his right, one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." The soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched, leaders scoffed. "He saved others," they said, "let him save himself, if he's really God's Messiah, the chosen ones." Soldiers mocked him too, offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out, "If you're the King of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with these words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself, and us too while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God, even when you've been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes. This man hasn't done anything wrong. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you're coming to your own. Jesus replied, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. A little later we read that by this time it was about noon and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone. Suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle, and Jesus shouted, Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. And with these words he breathed his last. When the Roman officer overseeing the execution saw what had happened, he worshipped God and said, surely this man was innocent. What is love? Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. These are the events of Easter Friday. Do you hear the stories of those that encounter the dying Jesus? You see, crucifixion was not just an horrific method of executing a person. It was not just about inflicting pain as punishment. It was a method devised by the Romans to make a statement to the public. It said this: if you commit a crime against Rome, we will hurt you. If you commit a crime against our interests, we will shame you. We will make you naked. We will torture and kill you. It was reserved for crimes that the Roman government wanted to make an example of. And in the moments of these, we see some people encounter the dying Jesus. A criminal. Jesus on a cross is crucified alongside 2 other criminals. We don't know what their crimes were, but we can surmise that they were serious crimes, because otherwise crucifixion wouldn't have been for them. Must have been a strange experience for them. I imagine that most people to crucified were in chains guarded by soldiers. I suspect that apart from maybe some immediate family, and probably even very little of that, they were alone. They must have seen Jesus, who had been scourged, who had fallen to the ground from weariness under the weight of a cross he was carrying. They must have been puzzled at the large crowd following him, wondered why. Why were the religious leaders as well there? Why were they mocking and scoffing and calling out to abuse him? Why did they place a title above his head? How to respond? Well, one of them joins in the mocking. I suppose it was kind of the easy thing to do. We've seen it in schoolyards where someone's being bullied or picked on, and it's kind of easy to join in the kind of activity. I mean, I'm assuming that he was in pain, knowing that he's about to die. He was probably very angry. Somewhat understandable that he would make cracks at Jesus and join in. But the second criminal responds in an unexpected way. Maybe he had watched with interest the way that Jesus had responded to those who abused him, the soldiers who hurt him, the religious leaders that mocked him. Maybe he heard when Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. And instead of abuse, he asked Jesus these life-defining words. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me. He changes from anger and pain and bitterness. Remember me. Because an encounter with sacrificial love changes everything. But there's not just criminals there at the cross, are there? There's soldiers. Roman soldiers were hardened men. They'd seen a lot in their life. They'd travelled around most of the known world. They'd fought, they'd conquered, they'd seen their friends die and be injured. They'd celebrated and also mourned the futility of war. I suspect that a Roman soldier's choice of radio station was not kind of love songs and dedication. When they went out to a date, I suspect they weren't going out to a rom-com. These were hardened men. And this centurion was stuck on the outskirts of the Roman Empire. Israel was not a glamorous post to be in. Here he was pushed to the edge of the world. Maybe he was being punished to quieten down these rebellious Jews who Romans wanted nothing to do with. I'm sure he wasn't impressed with his job. Day after day in charge of executions. He'd seen people parade naked and executed. And I'm sure that his heart was hard. You see, if this is not a formula to breed cynicism, I don't know what is. But on this day, a grizzled Roman military veteran, supervising another crucifixion, Jesus, who should be just another criminal, something different happens. Why does it happen for him? Why this change of heart? Maybe he sees the same things that the criminals saw. How Jesus responds so differently. Maybe he expects Jesus to strike back in anger and verbal anger at the abuse that comes towards him, but instead is silent. Maybe he hears when Jesus says, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." I'm not sure what was the clincher. But there is a moment, a time when the hardened centurion moves from skepticism to faith. And we read how he says, "Surely this man was innocent." He worships God. See, an encounter with the dying Jesus changes everything. An encounter with sacrificial love changes everything. Why is Christianity different than all other religions? See, Christianity is not a religion of power, though sadly some have made it out to be. Christianity is a religion of humility and sacrifice. But this is love. But why is Easter significant? Because greater love has no one than this, than they lay down their life for their friends. You see, this is Easter. The Apostle Paul writes about these events a couple of years later on. And he writes these words. He says that when we, talking not only about the people who were there at the cross, when we, you, the person beside you, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, when we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. And then it has a little change from what we've read. It says, now most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though perhaps someone might be willing to die for someone that is especially good. And I think that most of us here would like to think that we would put our hand up to die for someone that we love. But he goes further. He says God shows his great love for us. For us. By sending Jesus to die for us while we were still sinners. Greater love has no one than this, than they lay down their life for their friends. This is not friends. This is more. Greater love has no one than this, than they lay down their life for their enemies. See, what it's saying is for each one of us, even when we were a long way away from God, even when we were thumbing our nose, turning our back, shunning God, Jesus died for us. To lay down your life for a friend is an amazing expression of love. To lay down your life for your enemy is divine love. And I say to you very simply today that an encounter with the sacrificial love, an encounter with the dying love of Jesus, who laid down his life not just for friends but for each one of us, changes us. It changed a criminal who had lived his entire life in rebellion, not interested in God in any way, shape or form, only interested in himself and harming others. It changed his life. It changed the Roman centurion who had been engaged in battles, who was hard and twisted, cynical. It changed him. And it can change us. Because an encounter with sacrificial love changes everything. And I simply invite you this Easter to encounter that sacrificial love. To understand, remember, consider the sacrificial love of Jesus. Because he died so that we might live. Now I'm going to invite you to come and, in a sense, physically participate in that remembrance. The night before these events that we have spoken about today, Jesus had a small gathering in a room. Some of his closest friends. He shared a meal with them. He broke some bread, poured out wine as they would do. But he explained to them about the significance of the symbol that they would share. As he broke this bread, he said, "This is my body broken for you." And he invited them to do this in remembrance of him. This is my blood poured out for you. These are events that he would do less than 24 hours after this event. And I invite you now to come and participate in that same meal. Down the front on the different tables, there are bread and juice for you to drink. And so what I invite you to do now is, in your own time, and to come forward. As Ben said, there's normal bread and juice, and for those who are more concerned about COVID-safe materials, there are fully enclosed things. I invite you to come now. Come forward, take some bread. Take juice and remember the sacrificial love. Encounter the sacrificial love of Jesus.